Um, I'm kind of I'm not an archaeologist. I'm an information scientist, and I'm kind of really doing not archaeological research, but I'm doing research about archaeology. So everything that I'm talking about, it's more or less kind of always a meta level discussion about kind of how archaeology is being done and what you can say about it. This time I've been kind of gathering things that have been happening in different projects I've been involved in during the last few years, and just for the sake of credit, the Archaeological Information in the Digital Society project that ended finally in the end of last year. Then I can mention there's a bunch of publications that have come out of that project, and I'm kind of sort of making references to them during the presentation, although it's not really about what I have already been written, but it's more like thinking about things a little bit further. Then this work has definitely benefited of the discussions in the context of the course action ARKWORK, where I had the opportunity to discuss about archaeological practices and knowledge work during the 2-3 past years. And then it's very much related to the forthcoming project starting next month about capturing paradata for documenting data creation and use for the research of the future. Short and concise title. And the question is really about kind of I think this idea about kind of thinking about real time. It can be really useful in when we're thinking about archaeological documentation and archaeological information management, and especially the kind of the parts of kind of what needs to be documented and when, and what implications the documentation in different phases has to the use of the documentation, maybe at a later stage. There are some fundamental questions we can think about. Kind of what is archaeological data to start with, and it's obviously a lot of different things, and you can use many things as archaeological data as you can use many things as archaeological information. It's basically a similar kind of a question that what is archaeological practice and archaeological related practice that we have been pondering within the context of the course ARKWORK action, and there can be also many things, and it's very difficult to kind of draw a line that where archaeological practice begins and where it ends. Whether this is an archaeological practice, it has certainly some sort of a relation to some practices archaeologists are involved in, but it's not necessarily quite a question about that. And the same applies to archaeological data in the sense that you can have kind of, there are kind of certain things that definitely are archaeological data, but then you can use many other things as kind of as some sort of source material to do archaeological stuff. And really kind of maybe a more interesting question to ask could be, instead of kind of what is archaeological data, is to ask that when the archaeological data is, kind of when something becomes data in archaeology. And then another obvious question is that kind of where the archaeological data comes from, and from a temporal perspective, the question is that kind of when archaeological data is being made. And thinking about the documentation of data and documentation of documentation, this is really the crucial moment, because there we would need to be there to understand kind of what's really happening when the data is being made. And there are certain concepts in the title, and there are in the audience people who have been interested in these issues for a long time. And the question is really about kind of the data, about the making of the data, and that can be called paradata, or somebody prefer to call it provenance metadata. Although I think kind of provenance metadata, it's, even if they, when you look at the literature, so people mainly talk about the same things. So kind of paradata could be probably a little bit more than just metadata about the provenance of the data. And what is the relation to real time here in this context is really that when we think about data creation and data use, so they have different temporal trajectories, and they are being done in different kind kind of phases, different places, and different times when it comes to an archaeological investigation. I'm kind of sort of making a reference here to excavation as a kind of a stereotypical, almost kind of like an archaeological investigation, but this isn't obviously a kind of a question of only excavations, but it's more like also a survey, desk-based study, whatever. So they have their own temporalities, but they still have temporalities. And the thing is that kind of what happens and when, and if you, making it very simplistic in a sense, if you start interpreting it in a very early stage, so then you kind of create certain kind of data, certain kind of information early on. If you first capture and then you concern yourself with interpretation only later in the site hut, in the lab, maybe never really, it's always an option, then the data and the information that you're creating, it's going to be very different from the one that if you kind of really start thinking and synthesizing stuff already when you are kind of digging things in field. And you can draw different kinds of arrows here, and depending on kind of what is being created and when it's going to be used by the same person or somebody else, the data and the need for the data in the use end of the trajectory, so they are very different, and what is kind of really needed and what is there, there's a big difference. And really depending on kind of how we think that the data will be used and kind of for whom it is data and when, it would really require a focus in the creation, kind of in the start, to that, okay, kind of now I'm thinking that this data is going to be used by somebody, let's say, sometime in the future, or this is something that I'm doing here in order to look at it later today in the site hut in the afternoon. There's a big difference what kind of really needs to be documented. If it's later in the afternoon, I can make a rather kind of sketchy notes about stuff, and that could be quite enough. Whereas if it's for somebody in the very far future, so then I would necessarily need to somehow document the data creation in much more explicit terms. And there is then, if I try to go back to the question of kind of to the real time, so what is real time, or when is real time? And there you can probably kind of divide this into two different ways of seeing the thing, and this is a bad dichotomy really, but you can kind of think about real-time data capture or real-time interpretation in a sense, and depending on what is happening in real time, or whether it's kind of a real time something in between. So it really has an impact on kind of what comes out of the process. If you're real-time interpreting, so then you are probably not real-time capturing that much. If you are capturing real-time, so then you aren't probably doing that interpretation that much. Then to the theoretical part of the thing, I ended up reading a couple of texts written by Dutch, well, theoretician, I would say. Maybe somebody would call him a philosopher. He was definitely many other things as well. Flusser, who has made a kind of a distinction between imaginieren and einbilden. And he has been interested in kind of images. So this is not directly about archaeological data. But I think he makes some fairly interesting remarks about images that have kind of sounded very familiar to me when I thought about archaeological data. His idea is that kind of traditional images, they are imaginieren, and they are kind of that you interpret stuff, and it's about meaning making when you paint a picture, let's say, kind of in that way. Whereas technical images, that's kind of, for him it was mostly photos. It's about einbilden, and it's a question that you're operating a machine, and the machine is kind of capturing you something. Okay, you begin to see that this has some relation to what has been discussed about kind of different types of data capturing methods and images drawing in archaeology. And he's also developing a certain kind of a conceptual apparatus, how the things are kind of done when you are dealing with technical images. And his idea is that there is a kind of a tool with the technical images. It could be a kind of a camera, but it could be, of course, something else. It could be a total station or a laser scanner or whatever. And it's kind of the tool that creates the meaning for technical images. And then the human being who does the capturing or is the kind of the documenting person. So he or she is in the role of a functionary. And what is kind of really crucial here is a program, and it's embedded in the apparatus, in the machine that is being operated. And then kind of an outcome of this workflow is the technical image. And to put it in very simple terms, so you can probably kind of say that the traditional images, so they are reflections, they are interpretations, whereas the technical images, so it's a question about kind of captured data. And even if I'm not kind of really sure whether I agree with everything Flusser writes, I think he makes some interesting remarks. And what he writes is that kind of that the apparatus needs to be they would be really needed to be controlled by human beings, otherwise something really bad can happen. And the apparatus will kind of continue running its program even after the intended result, kind of intended by the human being who is operating the apparatus, has been achieved. And then something unintended is probably going to be happening. And then, because it's kind of it's really the technical image. It's the machine that makes the technical image, and there is it's a sort of kind of a collaboration between the operator and the machine. But it's also a question that the person who's operating the machine should be kind of somehow fighting against the machine in a sense that the machine doesn't take it over. And if we kind of let it go and let the machine decide what's going to happen, so his idea is that we're going to get technical images that are phantoms that can give the word and us the meaning. So it's really the camera or the laser scanner that's kind of really defining what the meaning is, and it's not anymore the human operator. This sounds a little bit familiar if you think about these dystopian ideas of what's going to happen when we just kind of capture things and we don't be critical to the technology and stuff like that, even in archaeology. And a final outcome of the whole, according to Flusser, is that we, or the machine is going to give us some kind of a self-produced dream, a kind of a fable, that it's not real, but it's kind of a composed thing by the machine. And okay, thinking a little bit back to the archaeological data and not just taking this as a kind of a stereotypical critique of kind of archaeological images or capturing stuff. So what can be said? And one possibility, what I came to think about is that we have this kind of an idea that we capture data, and then the data isn't enough. But what we need is that we kind of put things on top of the data to make it meaningful. And that's kind of, we capture something, then we interpret it, and it may be some information. And when we synthesize things together from many different surveys and excavations, so then we know something about the past. And that's kind of somehow the goal of archaeology. Okay, then it goes further to identity construction, understanding what we are as human beings and so on. But it's kind of a thing that we put stuff on top of each other. And that's fair enough. I don't kind of really buy the idea. This is very close to the idea of the data, information, knowledge, wisdom pyramid. That's very trendy in knowledge management still after a few decades. It can be criticized, but this is very close to that kind of an idea. And thinking about what kind of Flusser writes about the technical images and what the machine can do us. So in some sense, maybe sometimes the question could be also that we have to take something out of the data, out of the things that we consider as information and as informing us about the past, about archaeological stuff that was being done in the past. And we need to kind of take out of some paradata. We need to take out some metadata and some kind of understanding interpretations that are kind of built in the data, that are kind of there, and what the data suggests us, that what kind of conclusions we should be drawing. So kind of try to remove something of it and maybe replace it with something else. And okay, kind of following this very dystopian idea of Flusser, so we kind of take all the crap that the machines that we're operating, they are kind of putting in the data, and then we should be putting there kind of this good human stuff instead. Okay, this is not, it's not really that simple, and it's not really kind of that black and white, but still kind of this kind of an idea that we might actually need to take something out and put something else instead to make the data reflect something else meaningful from the perspective of archaeology and from the perspective of individual archaeologists. And then I guess it's high time for me to shut up and let you others to say something if there is time. Thank you.